IT auditing. All right, that's a pretty ambiguous statement. Right, what does it mean? Are we talking about trends in the issues that we find? Are we talking about trends in the issues that the auditors care about? Are we talking about trends in the tools and techniques that we use to audit IT? Now, those would all be very interesting discussions, but today I'm going to focus a little bit more on the big picture. I'm going to talk about industry trends, and I'm going to talk about the evolving role of audit. What's happening in the industry that's prompting us to think about the evolution of audit? Why do we audit our IT controls, and how does that fit in with the big IT security picture? And then I'll talk a little bit about how we have to audit to be effective and meet regulatory regulation and IT security going forward. So hopefully I'll be able to give you some guidance as to what other management teams are thinking and doing. So in typical auditor fashion, I'll begin by stating my objectives. We're going to define some macro trends, some industry trends. We'll talk about audit's response to those trends, and then I'll give you a practical example at the end to tie it together. Now, defining these macro trends, rather than stand up here and regurgitate statistics to you from the various incident reporting services, I decided to take a different approach. I got on the phone and I called a bunch of our clients, about 20 of them, and I spoke to them about the trend and the number and sophistication of attacks that they're expecting in IT. We spoke about their projected use of outsourcing going forward. We spoke about the trends in new services and technologies. And we spoke about the potential impacts from successful attacks at a bank. Are they getting worse? That last one's interesting. We'll spend a little bit more time on that one later. Now, you can probably guess what these trends are going to reveal. Okay, I can tell you there aren't going to be any surprises here. Right? Be prepared to be wowed by a bunch of information you already know. But the audit response is where it gets a little bit more interesting. Okay, what do these trends mean for the audit function? Really, perhaps more importantly, what should you expect from the audit function going forward? Okay, what do we need to do to augment the audit function? And then I'll finish up with a practical example of an actual audit that we performed earlier this year. My intent there would be to tie all of these points together. Hopefully, if I do it right, you'll be able to take something away from here and apply it to your organization. Okay, given those objectives, here are a couple of things we're not going to cover today. All right, I'm not going to talk about specific numbers. I'm going to stick to the big picture trends. I'm not going to talk about specific vulnerabilities. Pretty interesting, but also kind of boring if you're not an IT geek like me. Really not useful for our purposes today. Instead, what we'll do is we'll consider these trends from a management point of view. Okay, we're not going to get bogged down in the details here. I can tell you from personal experience that you have not lived until you've tried to explain an NTLM brute force authentication vulnerability to an audit committee. I don't know, someone would like to know. Which brings me to my first takeaway point. IT security, it's a management issue, it's not a technical issue. As I proceed through the presentation, I'll make a couple of points like this one here. I think these are especially important when you're thinking about IT security in your organization. Okay, so let's get right to it. Increase in the number and sophistication of attacks. Everybody expects an increase in the number and sophistication of attacks. I don't think that's a surprise. Think about the Zeus Trojan, right, designed specifically to attack banks. It begins by attacking your customers' machines. Those clients that connect to the bank's website, they log in, this Trojan activates in the background and makes transactions. 7, 8 months ago, big one was discovered in England, rated about $1 million from 3,000 accounts. The money flowed out of these accounts into accounts in Eastern Europe. Money mules descended on those accounts and cleared them out. This is very organized, very sophisticated stuff. Technology is the proverbial double-edged sword. Right, it gives us efficiency on the one hand, but it greatly increases our attack surface on the other. How about new technologies and services? Right, cloud computing, the current buzzword of the day. Right, Google is building a business around that model. That's where you run your applications and all your data is stored out on the internet. Right? What does that mean for banking? Personally, I think it's just a matter of time. But not to be so theoretical, let's think about the realities of today. I'm a consumer banking customer. Okay? I opened up an account a couple of years ago. I've been into my bank branch exactly one time. Okay? On the day I opened up my account, I probably didn't even need to do that. Right? I bank online, I pay my bills online, I check my balances on my iPhone. Right? My bank sends me text messages. Did everybody see that Chase commercial? This was a pretty cool one. Those newlyweds are sitting on their bed on the night of their wedding, right? They're about to do the one thing that all newlyweds do on the night of their wedding, right? Count the money. Right? They take a picture of one of the checks with a cell phone. Goes into the account. Right? Pretty interesting. Pretty neat stuff. Now, granted, commercial banking is different. Okay, but consider this. That technophile 20-something of today is your business customer tomorrow. Okay, your relationships will always have value. There's no question about that. But these people are going to expect a certain level of sophistication. So I think the general consensus out there is that technology is going to be on the increase. How about outsourcing? Right, outsourcing is not going away. Let's think about some of the things that we outsource in the community bank. We outsource our core processing, our network management, our network security, our website design, the development, the maintenance, our perimeter security. We outsource services, right? Audit, loan review, penetration testing. I think that the consensus out there is that the use in outsourcing, right? The trend in the use of outsourcing is going to correlate with these new services and technologies. In other words, as we get more technical, as things get more sophisticated, we're going to have to rely more on outside people to bring in the expertise that we don't have in-house. Now, IT poses its own set of challenges to outsourcing. Right? Let's face it. You can have a loan review performed in your bank, for example. Okay, there may be 10 people in the bank who have a complete understanding of that report. Not so for an external vulnerability assessment. Right? In a small community bank, the risks identified in a report like that, there might not be a single person in the bank who understands it. So how do we manage these processes when we don't fully understand the risks? So I'll give you a little bit of insight on that shortly. The impact from successful exploits. One thing I think you'll learn if you talk to enough community banks is that they have a very difficult time quantifying the impact from a successful attack on the bank. Really, how do we quantify the impact when we don't fully understand the underlying risks? Really, when community banks talk about data breaches, what they're really talking about is a breach of customer data, right? GLBA. The reality, though, is that there are other considerations that kind of muddy the waters and make it more difficult to really quantify what the impact would be. Consider a typical community bank website, okay? There's no customer data on the server at all. Online banking's outsourced, okay? You get there, you click a link on the website, you go over to the core processor site now, and that's where you do all your online banking, right? That's pretty typical, probably applies to a lot of the people in this room. Low risk, right? Now, if you can just imagine that that bank's website is attacked, it's defaced. When users go to the site, they don't see the bank site anymore, right? Maybe they see some political message. Maybe they see pornography. Maybe they see some message that threatens users that their information's been compromised. Now, we know no data was lost, right? All the important stuff is over on the core processor site. But quantify the impact of that attack. You can count on it being in a newspaper, right? There's no question about that nowadays. Is it going to impact your ability to get new business? Quantify the impact of that attack with your existing customers, right? Is it enough that that customer will move down the street when his CD matures? Right? You're going to have to prove remediation to the regulators, okay? You're going to need a penetration test. You're going to need a vulnerability assessment. Maybe you're going to need a code review. Right? If you don't have an information security officer, they may make you appoint one. So really, risk in IT is more than customer data. So quantifying that impact is difficult. Lean towards the worst case. Uh-oh.
I had nothing.
Worst case scenario. Is there a hacker in the room?